Okay. So you were telling me about this really interesting passport that you have that you've now framed. So it's in a protected frame, and we can show that later. Tell me about that passport.
Yes, the passport was given to me by my Uncle Kyriako, who was also my godfather, who lived on the farm in Ontario.
Nana.
And he was Nono.
And Uncle Harry.
No, he wasn't Uncle Harry. He was Uncle Yes, Uncle Harry. I guess some people did call him Uncle Harry. That's right.
See, I thought him as Uncle Harry. So he's got three names.
Well, Kyriako is the Greek name.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And Harry, I remember as a little kid,
I'm not sure how Harry, because as I understand it, Kyriako does not translate to Harry, so I'm not sure how Harry came from there. But anyway, many years ago, he gave me this passport, which includes him and my mother, who was his older sister, and their parents when they came from Greece to the New World through Canada.
But it was your mother's stepmother, correct?
It was, but it was the only mother she ever knew. Because her mother died when she was born. My mother's mother died in childbirth. And her father remarried.
Estratus. Her father, her father, you're right. Sorry.
Her father remarried soon after his wife died because he had 4 children that need to be taken care of. And so he remarried very soon. And Uncle Kyriako was born a year after my mother.
So your mother had 3 older brothers.
She had 3 older brothers.
And now
one younger brother.
From a different mom.
From a different mother.
Okay.
She and her older brothers all had the same mother and father.
Gotcha.
They came across the ocean in 1925, February of 1925. They came from Athens, or through Athens, to Bordeaux, France.
That must have been cold. So they're crossing the Mediterranean.
They left, there are dates on the passport that indicate they left Bordeaux around February 11th and arrived in Halifax, Nova Scotia on the 22nd of February 1925. And then through Montreal onto Ontario.
I wonder how they got to Ontario. Did they
have no idea how they would have probably trained. My Aunt Ida, who was married to my Uncle Paul, who was one of my mother's older brothers, was a Canadian citizen, and she sponsored them coming into Canada. So that's why they came into Canada. Whereas my father came in through the United States, I think Boston. I think my dad came in through Boston.
Really?
I have to ask Phyllis that. Phyllis knows. I don't think he came in Ellis Island. I think he came in through Boston. And I know he lived in Boston for a while. But anyway, so this was 1925 that my mother and her younger brother and parents came.
And what year was your mother born?
1902.
02. So she was 23. Oh, wow. Okay.
1902.
So she was a young woman. Was she educated at that point?
I have no idea what her educational status was. Aunt Anna, who was my Uncle Kyriako's wife, my Nuna, my godmother, had told me that she herself was a teacher. Now, I don't know. I don't think that involved a university degree at that time. It was just any young woman who was willing to go to a schoolhouse and take care of the children during the day and try to teach them something. I think that might have been the criteria.
So did Nana already have a farm at that point?
Yes, they already, I'm not sure just when they were married, but I know, well, I only know that the passport indicates that my mother and her brother and parents came in 1922.
25.
Excuse me, in 1925, and my parents were married in 1929 on the farm in Ontario, where my mother and her brother and her parents lived, just outside of Windsor, Ontario, in Maidstone, Ontario.
Okay.
So I don't know the circumstances. I don't know any of the details of what went on during that time. Well, actually, the farm, there was some dispute as to who owned the farm. Uncle Paul, my mother's, one of her older brothers, supplied the money to pay for the farm. And he thought of that money that he was giving my Uncle Kyriako as rent for the farm, and Uncle Kyriako considered it payment for the land for the farm. So there was that dispute that never got resolved really.
Well, wait, go back now. So
The farm was for sale, and Uncle Paul provided the money to buy it apparently.
As a loan to Uncle Harry?
He considered it a loan, and Uncle Kyriako, or Uncle Harry, considered it mortgage payment, what we would call mortgage payment today.
Right.
So Uncle Kyriako considered himself to be the owner who was buying the land, and Uncle Paul considered him to be the renter. Kyriako was the renter.
Okay.
I don't know if it was ever resolved. It was resolved at some point, because when Uncle Kyriako died, he was able to leave the farm to somebody and so forth.
Do we know who he left that to?
Yes, I received some money, but I don't know if it's from the sale of the farm or just savings that he had, and also your mother, and also I believe your Uncle Jim, and I believe Dean Midgen, who was my cousin's son, received some money. But the big bulk of the land, of the property, of his estate, was left to Aunt Anna's nephew, who lived in Windsor, Ontario.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, so go back. So your parents are married in 1929 on the farm in Maidstone, Ontario.
Yes.
Okay.
They were February 10th, 1929.
Then what drew them back over the bridge to, do you know?
Because my father lived in Detroit, I'm sure, at that time. And so he
okay.
took his wife back to Detroit with him.
And was he already running a restaurant then?
I don't think he had the restaurant then. I'm not sure what he was doing then. He might have worked, I think he might have worked for either my Uncle Paul or my Uncle Gus, who both had restaurants in Mount Clemens, Michigan at one time. And he might have worked for them for a while. I'm not real sure.
I'm wondering how they all got established in Mount Clemens, because we heard a lot about that.
And I suspect that my father met my mother through them, that he knew her brothers.
Okay.
And I think that's how he met them.
Okay. And so your father, who is Stratus, was both in the probably worked in their restaurants, eventually had a restaurant.
Yes, eventually had a restaurant, but prior to that, worked for somebody else, was in the restaurant business.
Coffee company, the St. Clair Coffee Company.
Well, I don't know that was his company.
I thought that tax return
did it have his name on it?
I
don't remember.
Well, there's a tax return for the St. Clair Coffee Company.
Yes, but I remember him working for Zaka Coffee. He worked for them, for Zaka Coffee Company, which was Zaka, which was a commercial coffee company, coffee and tea, and sold the coffee and tea to restaurants and to commercial institutions.
I wonder if it was an importing thing, or if it was more just a distribution. They'd take the coffee from where it wasn't Greek coffee.
No, it was coffee that was sold to restaurants that any restaurant would have. And we had Zaka coffee in our own house. I mean, we had a bag of Zaka. We drank Zaka coffee, and he would give it to neighbors and tea.
So it flowed freely.
Flowed freely.
Okay.